In a quiet valley town, where nothing extraordinary ever seemed to happen, the Thompson family lived a life so ordinary that most people barely knew their names. Their routines were predictable. Paul leaving early for his job at the power station, Elaine teaching music to children who adored her patience, and their kids, Hannah and Miles, spending afternoons drawing, studying, and playing in the backyard. It was the kind of family whose life could have played in slow motion, soft and steady, like an old home movie. Yet sometimes, fate selects the most unassuming people to carry the heaviest truths. And for the Thompsons, the truth began with a shift so subtle it almost went unnoticed. One rainy afternoon, Paul walked into their warm kitchen, looking pale, distant, and older than he had the day before. He barely touched dinner, barely spoke, and kept glancing toward the windows as though expecting someone to emerge from the storm. Days passed, and Paul became increasingly cautious, locking doors twice, checking the yard before bed, and hiding documents in places even Elaine had never seen him hide anything. At first, she chalked it up to stress, until the evening he finally confessed that something was happening at the plant, something dangerous, something he wasn't supposed to know. The facility, he explained, had been hiding a massive chemical contamination leak, one that had seeped silently into the river flowing straight through their peaceful town. People had been getting sick without understanding why, families losing loved ones without explanation. And Paul, through late-night inspections and forgotten data logs, had stumbled upon the truth. As the storm outside rolled across the valley, he revealed photos, reports, internal memos, evidence of a cover-up so large that the company had built an entire wall of silence around it. For a long moment, the family sat frozen, caught between fear and duty. They knew speaking out could cost Paul his job or worse, but staying silent meant allowing the suffering to continue. Elaine, usually calm and gentle, was the first to find her voice. She reminded them that right is still right, even when it feels dangerous, especially when it feels dangerous. And in that moment, an ordinary family made an extraordinary choice. They decided to expose the truth. The next days were a blur of whispered conversations, careful planning, and nervous late-night work at the kitchen table. Paul gathered more evidence, documenting every detail he could without drawing attention. Elaine reached out anonymously to environmental researchers, using encrypted messaging tools she'd never heard of before. Even Hannah contributed, scanning documents with steady hands that trembled only when she thought about what might happen if they were discovered. The family became a quiet operation, secretive, tense, yet united with unshakable purpose. They compiled everything into a massive digital archive, organizing the evidence chronologically and creating multiple backup drives hidden around the house. Elaine recorded a soft, steady narration, explaining the data in simple human terms, why it mattered, what it meant, and who was being harmed. Her voice, gentle yet resolute, became the backbone of the evidence file. On a quiet Sunday night, while the rest of the valley slept, the Thompsons gathered around their dimly lit laptop. Paul hovered over the trackpad, hesitating as the weight of the moment settled on all of them. He looked into the faces of his wife and children and saw fear, but also determination. With one final breath, he clicked send, transmitting the files to independent journalists, investigators, and organizations around the world. And just like that, their lives changed. Responses arrived within hours. First, a single journalist asking for a call, then dozens more. The story exploded online. Headlines spread like wildfire. Accusations of industrial negligence, whispers of corruption, questions directed at executives who had always operated above suspicion. Suddenly, the Thompsons' quiet home became the center of a national storm. Reporters arrived in droves. Drones hovered over their property. People they'd known for years began looking at them differently. Some with gratitude, some with fear, some with anger. The company retaliated almost immediately, suspending Paul without explanation, sending unmarked cars to idle near the driveway, and spreading rumors that the leak was exaggerated. But others quietly supported them. Neighbors left anonymous thank you notes. Former employees shared their own stories. The truth had begun to swell, unstoppable and undeniable. Eventually, the family decided to reveal their identities publicly, not for attention, but for protection. Standing in a bright newsroom studio, microphones clipped to their trembling clothes, they told the world what they had discovered. Paul's voice cracked as he described what the company had hidden. Elaine spoke with calm conviction about the families unknowingly harmed. Even young Hannah explained her role, her voice quiet yet brave. Millions watched. Their story turned from environmental scandal to human courage. Investigations followed, lawsuits mounted. Government agencies launched inquiries that reached far beyond the valley. The power station was forced to pause operations. Cleanup teams arrived. Executives who once seemed untouchable were suddenly cornered by facts they could no longer smother. Months passed, and though life never returned to the simple calm it once was, the Thompsons began to heal. One spring afternoon, they walked together along the river, the same river once poisoned by greed and silence. The water was clearer now, though the past still lingered in the soil, in the memories of those who lived through it. But the Thompsons had become symbols of something bigger than fear. They were proof that ordinary people can change the world when they refuse to remain silent. They never wanted to be heroes. They never wanted fame or recognition. They simply wanted the truth to be heard. And in doing so, they became the family that broke the news. The family that reminded the world that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through trembling voices, late-night decisions, and the quiet bravery of people who choose to speak when silence is easier. Their story endures as a reminder that sometimes the most powerful headlines come not from newsrooms, but from kitchen tables, where families gather and decide that enough is enough.